fam out there. We are talking NFL draft 2025. Shedeur Sanders debacle with being drafted at this moment. Like, what is up, right? What is going on? Well, this is your favorite coach, referee, Coach Smith. Love the game 24/7. Joining you guys live on YouTube, Facebook, and IG. What's going on, fam? There's a lot happening, or I should say, there is a lot happening, but there's a lot not happening with this draft that's happening right now. Let me let some folks, since I just got on live, join me. Chat. Let me put my website out there because I got some things that'll be coming up for you guys for my next webinar. Or I should not next webinar, but my next event, which would be a webinar for you young athletes and parents out there on getting information on help you to get your kids' education without having to come out of your pocket to pay for it. All right? Well, you are going to pay somewhat for it because you're going to invest in them early and now to get their opportunities to get scholarships, be recognized, earn scholarship opportunities, whether they're athlete or non-athlete. That's what the webinar is going to be about. I put my two sons through school pretty much almost debt free. My oldest son, my first one, was full scholarship athletics. My other son was academic scholarships, state scholarships, institutional scholarship money. I worked there as an employee that helped as well. But yeah, so there's a lot of things you need to do ahead of time to make that happen, to make that work, right? And so as parents, you got to invest early into your young person. But today we're talking about the draft, NFL draft. So I wanted you folks to jump on, and here we can discuss it, because no, we have never seen anything like what we're seeing right now with an athlete like Shedeur Sanders, who is one of the top quarterbacks in the college football draft this year in 2025 that has not been drafted. I mean, let's just be honest and tell it like it is. He should have gone by now to those teams who did need a quarterback. Right? Now, there were some teams that did not need a quarterback. But there was the Rams, the Raiders, the Seahawks, Pittsburgh, the Giants. Arizona might need to pick up somebody because they're not sure what Kyler Murray's, what he's going to do. So that's a potential. Arizona might have been a potential. I don't know if I said the Cleveland Browns. I think I missed them. They need a quarterback. So there was a good maybe almost 8 or 10 teams that needed a quarterback. And Shedeur was one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in college football that should have been drafted to those teams that drafted other guys before him. You got the older guy out of Louisville, right? He's been injured for 3 years. So, he's injury prone. And he goes second, third round, whatever it was. I don't think Milroe is a better quarterback, especially when it comes to throwing the ball. But he's a work in progress. But he's definitely not the accurate thrower, Milroy's not the accurate thrower that Shedeur Sanders is when it comes to passing the ball. I mean, you know, the young man has shown coming from HBCU to, you know, to jumping up to major Division I football. But hey, it doesn't matter about so much about the conference he played in. You know, he played Division I football for 2 years and had a lot of success. Improved the team from 4-8 his first year to 9-4, whatever it is, the next year, and almost made opportunity to make the playoffs. So when you're playing Division I football and you're trying to go to the NFL, that's all that matters. And you have some success. You're still playing against top level talent when you're playing Division I football. You know, I look at, you know, like Zach Wilson, that the Jets drafted, you know, that shouldn't have been drafted that high in the first round over Justin Fields. Justin Fields is still, which we all knew was still a top level quarterback, that's still touted as a starter, and now the Jets end up getting him now after all of this that they went through in losing seasons. You know, they looked promising because their defense helped them win some games, and the offense was so-so. But you know, he got drafted as a top 5 pick, top 3 pick, Zach Wilson for the Jets, and I felt like if Zach Wilson would have gone somewhere else and not thrown to the wolves, and being in New York, he may still be a starting level QB, right? But when you put a guy like Zach Wilson who wasn't ready to be a starter with the Jets, and you had a chance to draft Justin Fields in that same draft that you drafted Zach Wilson, now you have Justin Fields that you should have had 4 or 5 years ago, right? And to me, Shedeur Sanders is a better quarterback than Zach Wilson. But everybody wants to talk about athletic ability. Hey, what's up, Pearson? I hear you, bro. You in Tampa? That's right. Yeah, that's right. You said you was gonna be there. You need to holler at Todd while you're in Tampa with your cousin Kenny Anderson, Ka. That's my buddy Stefan Pearson, who's the cousin of Kenny Anderson. And some of you guys, if you know basketball, you're familiar with Kenny Anderson. He's in Tampa, Florida, back home in my hometown, doing a basketball camp. And so my buddy, who I played college ball with, Stefan Pearson, is there with his cousin Kenny Anderson in Tampa, Florida, helping with the camp. But yeah, like I said, this 2025 draft has been, I don't think it's been a bad draft. It's been a bad draft because of what's going on with Shedeur Sanders. But overall, I think most teams did draft based on need in other positions. But when it came down to the quarterback position, I think the Giants, once again, we're going to see, just like they did Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones had athletic ability, but what did it do for him because he had athletic ability? He didn't have the other tangibles or intangibles that you need a quarterback to be a high draft pick, right, in the first round, right, and didn't bring any success to the Giants. Good kid. All these kids are good kids. But we're not talking about kids, whether they're good. There is a difference between when we're looking at strictly talent. We're not looking at people's personality. All right, I know teams do all that, and they have to do all that because they're giving millions of dollars, okay, and whatnot. They want to make some decisions, and sometimes they don't. In most cases, some of these teams don't make the right decisions. I think they make some good decisions, but when it comes to certain positions like the quarterback positions, we see a lot of teams have made some bad decisions, and the Giants, I think, have made another bad decision. I don't think that kid is a better QB than Shedeur Sanders that they picked up from Ole Miss. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's going to do well. But sometimes when you put certain players like Zach Wilson got drafted to the Jets when he shouldn't have, the New York team, you know what comes along. You know, everybody, we know what comes along when you go to certain teams in certain markets. There's a lot more pressure on these young men to perform and to have success. And some kids just aren't ready for it. But a kid like Shedeur, who grew up with a father like Deion Sanders, been in the limelight, around the limelight, you know, because of who his father is, and because hey, we don't know what Shedeur said in some of his interviews. I mean, we've seen some things, he could have said something to the effect that maybe bothered some teams, but you be rest assured, these teams do talk, these teams don't communicate, these owners and whatnot, and these GMs don't communicate with each other. You don't think they communicate with each other, then something's wrong with you. All right, this is a tight-knit group of owners, and they talk about stuff, okay, that we don't even have any clue about when and how. They can have meetings all types of ways, and we don't even know about it, okay? Now, I'm not saying this is the case with Shedeur. I think there probably been enough GMs of teams who needed a quarterback may have had some conversations, but that's just hearsay. I'm not saying that I know that or not, but I'm just saying to not think that they don't communicate with each other. They communicate with each other when they need to make trades. We heard Adam Schefter say when the Giants drafted up, to pick the quarterback out of Ole Miss, they moved up, and he said on his show or on his interview that conversation had been going on for 2 weeks. But during the whole time prior to the draft, we were hearing that there was no conversation between teams. When there was conversation between teams, you best believe that was a thought prior to this draft, and some conversation was happening prior to the draft, that if the Giants saw that opportunity to move up to get, whether it was Shedeur or this Dart kid, they were going to do it. And they already had talks with people, but it wasn't publicly made known. But there was conversation. So that's what I mean. Let's not sit up here and think that these people don't have conversation, regular conversation, about certain matters, and even about Shedeur Sanders. And there's some teams. There's a lot that they saw with the entourage of people on the sidelines at Colorado games, and the camera, with Deion Sanders Jr., always there. So some teams probably are concerned about, what's coming along with all that. And so we don't know when he was asked that question, or if he was even asked that question, because I'm sure in NFL they're not going to allow all that to happen. Okay. And now when Mike Tomlin didn't draft him for the Steelers and pick on the 21st pick, that brought some concerns. I know Tomlin, if he had the power to make that decision, he would have made that decision. Head coaches don't have the final say. Depending upon their relationship with their GM and their organization, they have some. And Tomlin does have some say so, because of his success and what he's been able to do in Steeler country. And Steelers are one of the only teams that have very few head coaches, right? They stick with their head coaches, and I'm sure in their, the way they do it, then they the way Pittsburgh handles business, that there was some conversation. Let me see if I can get my buddy Pearson on IG. Hold on, Pierce. Let me see if I can get you on. I don't know if this thing, man. Sometimes this thing acts up. See if there may be something on your end, Pearson, that you got to accept when I send the invite. I might need to send you an invite. Let me see something here. I'm gonna send you an invite, and check your phone and see if you got the invite. I'm trying to get you on, boss. I'm not sure why this thing has been doing this to me. Can someone join? All right. I'm trying to get you in here, man. But keep trying, Pearson, see if you can join. I'm not sure why it's not allowing you to join. But I'm trying to get you in. But yeah, man, check your view, Pearson, and see if it'll let you in. For some reason I've been having issues with letting people in when I want them to allow them in. I'm not sure why it's not I'm not sure why. For some reason, why this invite. Okay, I got you now. Hey, what's up, man? All right. I'm in sunny West Tampa, right? Yeah, I see you in my neck of the woods. Turn you got your. I see you in my neck of the woods. I see you. Tell everybody I said what's up. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I lost you. I lost sound. I had you, but I lost you. Now I hear you. Now I hear you. Hear me now? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. We're in West Tampa right now. We're down by the Tampa Stadium. Okay. Tampa Stadium. Yeah, yeah. Just taking a break, man. Okay, y'all did the basketball camp today? Y'all started already? Or? The basketball camp going on now, man. We got to take a little break. We'll be back between 5 and 7. Okay. So, good deal, man. Oh, it's always lovely down there in the Bay Area, St. Pete, Tampa Bay, man. You know that. And I see no alligators yet, so I'm good. Oh yeah. You hopefully, yeah. If you go to that bay, you might see some sharks, but yeah, you ain't gonna see no gators. You probably a good distance away from them gators. Yeah, man. Absolutely, baby. Yeah. So you know what? We're trying to figure out what's going on with Sanders. I hadn't got drafted yet, man. Well, that's what that's what I'm on. That's what I'm on my live talking about. I'm on my YouTube and my Facebook, man, trying to, just share some like, maybe it was something during his interview he said, or they don't know what comes along, because we're used to seeing the cameras in the locker room, his brother filming it, his older brother Deion Sanders Jr. filming everything. So, some of these teams don't want you to have more, on you as a player than the shield. You know what I mean? You know how that can be. So who knows, man? But we know this stuff, man, has never happened to this degree, because you got his dad's a head coach in college, potentially looking at somebody wants him to be an NFL coach. So hey, it's a lot on what's going on with, because he should have been drafted a long time ago. I mean, he should have got picked up. He should have got, compared to the guys that have already have been drafted, he should have gotten drafted hands down by now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They all talking about athletic ability. We seen quarterbacks with less athletic ability, more athletic ability, none to get drafted. So all this athletic ability stuff get tossed out the door somewhere, because he got enough athletic ability to play the position. And he has a strong enough arm and accurate arm to where he should have been drafted. He should have been drafted by now. So it's some foolishness going on, and we have to call it out when we see it. And just another thing too is, some kids got to understand things very rarely happen the way you want it to happen. A lot of stuff don't happen the way you want it to happen. Sometimes it turns out better than what you think, but it's definitely not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen. And whenever you get your chance, you just need to make sure you take advantage of it. That's all. And he's going to get it. He's going to get a chance, and we know he'll be ready to take advantage of it when he gets his chance. So, but that's the main thing. Yeah. Yeah. Right now, the best thing is that, I mean, you can see, they're showing shots of him, yeah. And he's concerned, but at the same time, he knows that, yeah, good things are gonna come this way. Oh, absolutely. Because you look at the issues that Johnny Manziel had. You look at issues that a lot of our quarterback there in Tampa, for the Bucks. It'll come to me, but he had some cocky issues or whatever, but he still got drafted where he was supposed to get drafted. You know what I'm saying? But none of them have a daddy, a father like a Deion Sanders, who's a Hall of Famer, and doing the things that he's doing and making a difference where he's making a difference. So none of them have that aspect. So that's the only thing I can say that's new to all this is, look, we know Archie Manning was a good quarterback, but he wasn't a Hall of Famer, So Peyton Manning and Eli, they come from a well-known dad, but he's not a Hall of Fame and he's not coaching. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. So
well, the most important thing now is that so when it's time for Archie Manning to be in the draft, what's gonna happen to him?
Right.
Will he go 1 and 2 first round?
Right. Yeah. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now they're gonna say, oh, he has athletic ability. Okay, well,
exactly.
that'll be
Exactly.
But what if he don't have the accuracy or the high intelligence? Now we all assume because he's a Manning, he's gonna have some high intelligence, and he should because of what his family now, and he's more athletic than Peyton Manning. Archie, because Peyton wasn't athletic. Peyton Manning was not athletic. You know what I mean? Neither was Eli. They weren't athletic. So what's your excuse? Because you're gonna tell me Shedeur is more athletic than both of them.
Exactly.
He's more athletic than.
I want to know, and it's all gonna come out, but I want to know the reason why.
Well, I don't know if the real reason will come out. We'll have a lot of speculation and a lot of, this or that. But now I will say this, like I was saying earlier, people try to say, well, teams don't talk. These teams talk. They talk. Because when the Giants moved up to draft their quarterback, when the Giants moved up and traded, Adam Schefter said conversation been happening for 2 weeks. 2 weeks conversation, and then but before the draft, saying there's been no conversation. These GMs talk to each other. Don't think these people don't talk to each other. They talk to each other on a regular basis before the draft. So
the thing is that they all have to explain why he has not gone in the first or second round.
Hey, in this new climate we have today, from the president, they got more bravery about doing some stuff and don't care and don't have to explain anything. It is what it is. That's just the climate we in today.
All I know is I heard this morning that the president was asking why he hadn't been drafted yet.
Yeah, I don't care about what he got to say, but yeah, I heard that too, but I don't care about him. Yeah.
But with this climate, right?
Yeah.
For the president on his stance to say why hadn't this young black man been.
Well, he be gaslighting anyway to try to get a leg up anyway on some stuff. So he's trying to get some brownie points or something because the way things going right now, he needs some positivity or something coming his way. But I don't care about what he said. We already know. We don't need him. We don't need him jawing in about anything. Because did it change anything? Did it change anything when he said anything? It didn't change nothing. It didn't change Shedeur getting drafted. Because matter of fact, now NFL owners, the NFL don't care for Donald Trump anyway. Owners don't care for him. That's when he tried to get a team. They don't have no love for him. Yeah. No, they probably got more power than he does. But he got the NFL, they don't care for him anyway because when he tried to get a team back in the day, they don't have no love for him. So they don't really care about what he has to say. So but yeah, man, it's just but like you said, the main thing for some of these young kids to consider and learn right now, very rarely does anything happen the way you plan it. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it does, but that's very rare. Sometimes, like I said, it may go better than you realize. You know what I mean? It might go better than what you thought, right? And it may not go as bad as you think, but it definitely is not going to go the way you think is or the way you try to plan it to go. You know what I mean? So you just got to be prepared to to make best of your opportunity when it comes. Because he gonna get an opportunity. It's not that he's not gonna get an opportunity. But
one thing I wanted to say too, Jeff, is that as an individual who has went through the process, right?
Yeah.
He's did everything he should do, and although we're at the point where things are not working out, maybe the way he thought they was gonna work out.
Yeah.
But by trusting the process, which that's what he's doing right
Right. He's yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because you got to look at it. He don't have any disciplinary. He don't have any discipline issues. You know, he ain't been to jail. He's not been in trouble. You know, he's a model citizen. So you don't have any of those excuses of why you're not drafting him, because you don't have any of those issues. So, you know, that's why it's like it can only be because of who his father is, for one. It can only be something like that, because he's not a bad kid. You know, you want to say he's cocky, and what you want a quarterback that's not confident? You want a confident quarterback, you know. Yeah.
I think it's just his confidence, you know, and I know, you know, they may take it from being arrogant.
Yeah.
But that young man's not. He is confident. He knows what he is capable of doing.
Yeah.
And you know what? What's wrong with that? I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah. But hey, when they want to send a message about something, when they want to let you know, you better believe them. You better believe them the first time they tell you. So that's all it is, man. You know, when they tell you. All right, Brandon. All right, man. Y'all have fun down there in Florida. All right, bro.
All right. So hey, we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Much love.
All right, man. Love, man. Appreciate you. Well, there we go, y'all. You know, it's just, you know, there's no reason why Shedeur shouldn't have been drafted by now. We all know that, you know. What you say here, Donovan? Let me see. I'm sorry I missed you. I was on there with my buddy. What was your comment here? Let me go back and read what you said. Appreciate it, man, for the comments. Yep. It's all about our youth. Yep. And our job is to teach them, exactly. And it's our responsibility as grown folk to direct our youth sports and academics in the right direction. That's right. Coach Donovan Williams' 24-hour stream is joining, sharing his comments. And that's right. You know, we just have to let our young people know, hey, everything's not going to always go your way, right? As you hoped and dreamed. But the opportunity that you hoped and dreamed for, that'll happen. It'll come. You know, if you put in the work, right? Hey, what's up, BUG? Man, come on my IG so I can get you on. Get on Instagram, Coach Smith 27. I can get you on. We can holler. But yeah, I mean, things aren't gonna always go as you or the way you plan for it to happen. It doesn't mean your opportunity won't happen. That's not what I'm saying. I believe your opportunity will happen if you put in the work, if you put in the effort, right? If you're coachable, all those things, because we've seen people with worse situations, right? Players, okay, we've seen that, and they've gotten drafted, right? And some of them have gotten drafted where they should have, or maybe they dropped a little bit. I remember Warren Sapp dropped a little bit because I think it was because of the marijuana thing or whatever the case may be, that he had, right? We know, you know, that was an issue back with some. I'm just naming some different players. I remember when I heard somebody mention and tried to give Bo Jackson. You know, I grew up in St. Pete, Tampa, Florida area, and Bo Jackson told the Bucks that if they drafted him, he wasn't going to play. And so, you know, and they didn't tell the story. I think it was Shannon. He didn't on an Ocho show the other night that I listened to last night from Friday night. You know, you got to tell exactly what happened. The reason why Bo Jackson told the Buccaneers that is, you know, everybody want to say because the Bucks were bad at that time. That had somewhat, but very little to do with it. What happened was Bo Jackson took a trip to visit the Bucks, and it was against the NCAA rules. And he asked the Bucks if it was okay for him, you know, to do that. And he got in trouble or something for it. And because of that situation, because he felt like the Bucks, you know, they lied to him about the whole situation, and he was upset about that. It wasn't necessarily because the Bucks, you know. Now this is a story that I saw from following up, and I heard Bo Jackson in an interview mention this in a story that I watched, and why he told the Bucks he didn't want to come because he got in trouble with the NCAA, and he didn't, and he asked them before, so it was something along that line where that's what the issue was, more than the Bucks being a bad team, and we all knew that Culver House was a bad owner, for the way he handled the Doug Williams whole situation and whatnot. So that was also, some of it. But more than anything else, when I watched the interview with Bo Jackson, he mentioned that the Bucks flew him out. I think it's something like that, flew him out because he was playing college baseball and pro baseball too at the time. So he said, I'm not going, because of what they did, because they weren't truthful and honest with him when he took that trip or visit to the Bucks organization before the draft while he was still in college. So there was a bad taste in his mouth from that whole situation as to why he didn't want to play for the Bucks. While Bo Jackson told the Bucks about why he said, "Hey, I'm not going. If y'all draft me in the first round, I'm not playing for you all." And then, of course, the Bucks traded him to the Raiders, and he ended up playing football for a brief moment until the injury happened. But that was what the issue was with him. But he wasn't trying to tell them, like demanding that they not draft him. He just said, if y'all draft me, which he knew the Bucks probably were going to do that because they're not to, and the type of owner Culverhouse was, he didn't apologize or probably didn't handle it the right way. Where Bo Jackson probably would have played for the Bucks back then if the Culverhouse, the owner, would have handled that whole situation better or differently. But we can go up and down the list. Like I said, Johnny Manziel. I believe if he was somebody that put in the work, that he probably would still be in the league. But he came with some issues, and they knew that he came with issues. Yeah, I mean, he jumped off the page with his athletic ability. But like I said, we want to just hone in on athletic ability. The Manning brothers weren't athletic, and you're going to tell me Shedeur Sanders is not more athletic than Peyton Manning and Eli Manning? Heck yeah, he's more athletic than those guys. So we can't use the excuse all the time about athletic ability, right? We got some of these guys in the front office making these decisions and never played that game at a high level. That's why you need to have some football people on your scout team or in your decision-making front office, and you don't, right? A lot of times you don't have football people making the decisions. Now, to me, Jacksonville looked like they may have had some football people because they traded up to do what? To get Travis Hunter, right? Now, he's the only Colorado player to get drafted that I believe right now. But I get tired of hearing all this stuff. I had the blessing of being in the league and being in training camp with the Houston Oilers with Warren Moon, who blessed Cam Ward. He brought his number out of retirement and allowing Cam Ward to wear his number 1 jersey since Tennessee Titans did relocate from Houston, Texas, as the Oilers to Tennessee when Warren Moon was still there. And I had the blessing of being in training camp with Warren Moon and the great quarterback. Caught some passes, quite a few passes from Warren Moon in training camp, and Warren even complimented me about my ability and my talent playing that level, and that I should have been on the team. But he's not a decision maker. But yeah, so like I said, all this athletic ability, I've been there and know for sure that there are guys sometimes that make these teams. If we're going to strictly talk about athletic ability, and some of these guys aren't always making a team because of athletic ability. Okay, there's a lot of other things going on, but I'm not going to get into all that. But for the most part, these guys are, the best players in football. All right, even if they're not the best, always the best athlete to make a team, they're still top tier talent to be able to play that game. All right, the NFL game. For you to even get an opportunity, just like myself, blessed, an older brother and my son, for you to even have the opportunity to get training camp and potentially have the opportunity to try to make a team, you got to have the talent to be able to sign a contract and get an opportunity. So I don't even want to make light of that because there's a lot of guys that could have been playing NFL that didn't get the opportunity, or they got the opportunity and it just didn't happen. Like myself. But there's a lot of different things that can come into play like that. But I don't hear this stuff about athletic ability with Shedeur Sanders, because he's much more athletic than Peyton Manning and Eli Manning ever were. right? And they still competed in the NFL as a high level because of how smart they were. Because why? Their father, Archie Manning, was a very good, he wasn't Hall of Fame type, but he was on some bad teams when he first came in the league with the Saints, right? And I think, forget who else he played for. Um, so, but he was able to teach his sons, you know, Peyton and Eli, how to improve upon, you know, him, as their dad. And Dion has done the same thing with his boys, right? I did the same thing with my son, right? With both my sons and other young men I had the blessing of coaching. Um, but so, that's how it is. But I don't want to hear this stuff about athletic ability because Shedeur Sanders, because of who his father is very intelligent, who his father's been able to allow him to get coaching from, like Tom Brady has been known to be a mentor to Shedeur and teaching him about the game. And so, because of who Dion is, he's had access to help Shedeur and Shiloh get some of the best coaching other than just him. Because Dion is not the only one that has coached his kids. He's had other people speaking to his kids' lives and coach them, just like I did with my oldest son. And he had the blessing of being in the NFL. Why? Because of the things that I knew from my opportunity that, hey, I'm going to tell you this is what you need to do to better your opportunity and your chances of getting yourself an opportunity to play NFL, right? And I've done that with other, not just my own son, but other young men that I felt like had the talent to play major college football and the potential to go to the next level. That's what you do as a father, period. If I got access, I got an older brother that played pro ball. So my son both my boys had their uncle and their dad to tell them, right? And anybody else that I knew played that level that can speak into my kids' lives. My son's oldest son, QB Coach John Kaleo, right? Top quarterback coach in our area, right? In the country, I believe during that time my son was coming up. He was one of the best QB coaches. Speaking into my son's life because of the connections and the people I know. I'm gonna make sure that I give my son and any other young man that was friends with my sons and grew up with my kids opportunities to know how to develop their skills, right? To give them opportunity to get scholarships, and quite a few of them got opportunities to do that, right? I got Darius Williams, right? Young man grew up with my boys, went on to Carson Newman to play, become a All-American at Carson Newman early in his years in college football, and played had opportunity to play pro ball, Canadian League, playing indoor league right now. If he didn't have his knee injury, he probably would have had an NFL opportunity if he didn't hurt his knee coming out his senior year. But he's still playing pro ball. So, there's a lot of different, ways to help these young men to develop and be good football players from our experiences as fathers. So that's what Dion has done. He's given his sons and any other those young men that he coached during his little league years an opportunity to get the exposure of some of the best coaching, some of the best minds in football. And it's not just coming from Dion; it's coming from Warren Sapp and others that he has out there coaching with him. They're speaking to his sons and all these other young men that he's had the blessing of coaching. And so so these young men have exceeded and excelled as athletes. But let's get off this soapbox at that any position really, because sometimes these test results don't really tell you how good of a player will be, right? Because there's some guys I tell you, I remember my brother telling me about a guy, I forget his name. Oh, I forget the guy's name right now, but I remember he was a top linebacker out of Nebraska back in the 80s when my brother was playing in the mid 80s. And he was with the Bucks. He was a first round pick with the Bucks. And my brother said, man, he could barely, do 225, but he was a beast. He could barely lift 225. So we can always, but he had that man strength, right? He wasn't somebody that was big, that spent a lot of time in the weight room. And, he could do 225, but not when you look at the size of this guy at linebacker. He was a outside linebacker, edge rusher. But when you looked at, he was a man child, but he wasn't used to being in the gym lifting weights regularly. So 225, he did a decent amount of reps, but not what you thought he would have. And he wasn't somebody that was going to go in there and bench 400 or 500 pounds. But when he got on that football field and you looked at his video, right, you knew why he got drafted first round, because of what he did on the football field. You couldn't go by what, and I know he had a decent 40 time and whatnot, but you can't always go by all that stuff. That's why you got to put eyes on guys. Okay, that's why you got to go look at how they play, right? And not just video. You got to see them live and in action and what their technique, the technique they use. But some guys are so determined. It ain't about weight room, but they got strength, right? They got grown man strength, right? And determination that when they're on that football field, it's a whole different ball game when that ball gets snapped, right? They go into a whole nother mode and different motor turns on, right? And so that's what you have to you got to understand, that we can all sit here and say when we talk about somebody is trash or this or that. I know sometimes I don't care about using some of those words, but we're not talking about the athlete's personality or if they're a nice kid and all. That's not what we're talking about. We're strictly talking about what their athletic ability is. And when I strictly look at that, I will tell you right now, Shedeur Sanders is better than all the other quarterbacks that have gotten drafted before him right now. Period. He's better than them. Even some of the ones that got more athletic ability than he does. Right. So I know Cam Ward is right up there. I would say him and Cam Ward are probably like neck and neck. But I would tell you right now, I'm not talking about a kid's personality, but I'm talking about their ability and how they play that game. Plain and simple. And being somebody who's been around football since I've been 7 years old, and I'm 57, 56 years old, right? So I've been around it all my life for the most part. And so sometimes when you got some of these guys that are making some of these decisions in these front offices, they have not a clue and can tell you what it's like being on that football field and how to play this game, right? They got there because of who they know, and there are some guys who play football, right? And I'm not talking about color. You need a race. I'm talking about give me some football players. I don't care if they're white or black or whatever they are. To be in that front office that know football, that played that game, and will tell you when they've gone and scouted, people, because there's some scouts. I've seen some NFL scouts, and I can tell they didn't even play no ball, right? You may have played on a small level, high school maybe, right? You got your degree and all that, and you spent time hanging around. And I'm not saying you don't know anything, because you've been around football long enough. You should know whether you played at a high level or not. You've been around, you should know. But I will tell you, if you haven't had the opportunity to play at a high level, you don't have some knowledge that some other folks have who has. Period. Because you know, if you played at a high level, if you played college football at any level, and then had the blessing of playing some pro football at any level, but definitely NFL. Let's talk NFL. If you haven't had a chance to play NFL and you only played some college ball, you should still know. But if you haven't played beyond high school, if you haven't played ball beyond high school, and I'm talking about at college at any level, right? If you haven't played college ball, and then on top of it, you haven't played NFL, you have no form of reference of what it takes to play that game at a high level, right? You have some knowledge, but it's limited knowledge. I'm just going to tell you have some knowledge, because if you've been around the game, you should know enough. And if you played it, and you played at a high level, then you know some stuff. But if you haven't done that, man, you got minimal knowledge. And because I can go out and go watch some kids play, and like I did my camp about a month ago, and I saw probably about a handful of kids that, man, not saying the other ones won't develop, because some kids develop late, right? And I saw some kids that, hey, they stick with it and they develop, But when you find some young kids that right out the gate, they already have athletic ability. I don't care how young they are. It ain't got nothing to do with race. I've seen quite a few kids that, man, I'm like, hey, that kid put some work in. I had some big kids. I had some middle school kids that were high school that I thought were maybe 10th or 11th grade kids, and they were like 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade linemen. Some kids that were linemen that were big for their age and had some some ability. And I'm like, man, if they stick with it, if these kids there, I had about 4 or 5 kids, man, that were huge, that were middle school kids at my camp a month ago. And I would say most of them had ability. And if they stick with it, lift weights, they stay committed to it, and they're coachable, and they're a student of the game, they can go to college at least. I know that. And then it's all up to you then on how hard you want to work, how much you love the game, and how hard you want to work to get to the ultimate level. But I had probably, out of those 34 kids, I probably had maybe 10 kids that I saw right off the bat was like, they got something. About 10 kids out of the 34 that I had in camp. And I'm like, yeah, and then it may be a few more. I would say maybe about half of those kids, 34 kids, I would say, yeah, there's a chance. It just depends on how they develop, how they grow. That they could probably go to college and get a scholarship and play college football. And then the other half, it just depends on, hey, give them another couple of years, a few years. And I had elementary and middle school kids, so I'm talking about some elementary school kids that I saw that, maybe about 2 or 3 of those elementary school kids, I was like, yeah, right out the gate, like, yeah. And then it may have been a few more, and I'm like, okay, well, let's give them a few years of develop and see what they look like. And if they look like they're going in the right direction with their development and their love for the game, and they could probably do something with it. So I would just say about half the kids that came to my camp. But the other half, I would just say, it just depends on what happens over the next, 2 or 3 years. You got some kids that'll drop off, and you got some kids like, man, they'll shoot up and develop and physically grow, and they'll do what it takes, right? I mean, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. You said I just didn't like how they took it out on the kid, and it's all about Dion and not him. Yeah, you're right, bro. Give the young man his opportunity based off not necessarily who his father is, but because of what you've seen on film. All right. Now I heard Dan Orlovsky on ESPN say he felt like he was at least maybe a late first round to a early second round pick. And he was just saying that was based off need, with the teams in the NFL, because you have to look at that. Overall, I think the draft has been good, and that most teams did draft based on need. But those teams that needed a quarterback, like I said, there's about 8 teams: the Browns, the Rams, the Giants, who else? Pittsburgh, Raiders. I named some more earlier. Like I said, it was probably about 7 or 8 teams with some of these other quarterbacks. Oh, Seattle. Yep, Seattle. That needed quarterbacks, that need a quarterback, right? The Jets wouldn't be a bad one. I wouldn't say the Jets would be a need. I would say the Jets, and then who else was I thinking about? The Jets and somebody else that I was thinking about. That they didn't necessarily have a need, but they could use a quarterback. But those teams I named just now, they needed a quarterback, and they passed on Shedeur. And what he said, then they pumped the media up, but he's in the top 2 pick for us to watch. Yeah. And they try to embarrass the young man on television. Yeah. I shared this the other day on my last night on my TikTok live. If you don't follow me on TikTok, go follow me. Appreciate it if you follow me on TikTok. Love the Game 24/7. And I appreciate you guys on follow me on YouTube, but go to lovethegame247.com and get all my social media platforms. But yeah, I remember I shared this last night on my TikTok live. This was like right after the season ended, and Shedeur was just starting doing his workout after the season ended, getting ready for possibly, doing something at the combine, which I didn't think he ever would, but just getting in shape, get ready for his pro day. And one of his best friends, who has a huge following on YouTube, interviewed him. His last name is Sanders, but they're not related. But it's one of his best friends. One of Shedeur and Shiloh's good friends, and he has a huge following. I can't remember his name right offhand. If I did, I would share it so you can go out and subscribe to him on YouTube, because I'm all about, pumping other people up too. Just like I always talk about Derek Tatum. Follow him on IG. He's good. And my man on Before You Go Pro, he's good also. But he did his interview, and the friend asked him, "Hey, what's the plans for us, man, and family, and everybody being with you during the draft?" And Shedeur made the comment like, "Oh man, I'm gonna stay close to home in Dallas, where it all started, back home in Dallas, because we don't want to put a burden on family to have to feel like they got to take time off work and travel and pay for this and that." And I'm like, now that put something, that put a little, I know why I you know held on to that thought from him saying that, but he had just said, he made that comment. I'm like, wait a minute, you got enough money, and your brother, and definitely your father, Dion, got enough money. And I ain't just talking about anybody. I'm talking about people that's like family, not just family blood, but those ones that you grew up as, like, how it is. We got friends we grew up with. We down like four flat tires, right? That's our saying. I know it's an old school saying, but that's something we say, man. You've been down with me since, I've been, we've been little, right? We grew up like brothers or sisters, right? Sisters and brothers, or cousins, right? And you know how we are, you know. And I know he can afford to fly people in, but I'm thankful that he didn't go to the draft. So I think Dion knew something was up, and he probably told Shedeur, "We're gonna be home, because hey, I know something crazy might go happen." Dion been around this long enough. This ain't his first rodeo. So, but when Shedeur said that months ago, well before any of this stuff was happening, he had made that comment that they were going to be home. So just imagine, man, like you said, Miles Stonag. Oh, I'm AG. I can't see what it is. Oh, Anthony again. Oh, that's Bug. Okay. Yeah, like you said, just imagine, man, if he'd have been at the draft and this happened, right? I would be more pissed, right? If he'd have showed up that and they did this to him, you know. But yeah, the media pump up this stuff. I don't think the media was wrong. They may not have known, what was going to go down as far as the draft, because the owners, man, they keep it close to the vest between them on things, right? But like I said, for you to sit up here and think these GMs don't talk to each other, for weeks we heard there's been no conversation about these going on, this and that. I heard Adam Schefter and those guys said on ESPN NFL Draft, saying about, oh man, it's been kind of quiet. But then when the Giants made their move to pick their quarterback, he came on later and said, oh yeah, this discussion has been going on for 2 weeks. But you said on previous shows, it's been quiet. There's been no talk. But then once the Giants moved and made their move to pick the quarterback that they did, Adam Schefter comes on and says, oh yeah, there's been talk. Now granted, that's because he's been told, if you say certain things before time, we won't be sharing anything else with you. Because Adam Schefter is the man that gets the word first. There's some reporters that get the word first, right? And Adam Schefter is one of those folks. And I listen closely to those guys. For somebody who didn't play the game and who's very trustworthy, Adam Schefter is one of those guys, right? And there's a few others I can name that they to get the information they get, they keep stuff close to the vest and don't say anything. But I remember when Adam Schefter said on NFL Network a week or two before the draft, it's been quiet. We're wondering why we haven't heard anything about any potential trade opportunities. But as soon as the Giants made their move and made their pick, and he came on a day later or later that day and said, yeah, this deal has been going on discussion has been going on for 2 weeks between the teams. That's why I said you can't believe everything. My dad used to say, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, because sometimes our own mind would play tricks on us and we thought we saw something and we didn't. So he would tell you, hey, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. Some of y'all grew up, y'all heard that old school saying from your grandmama or your auntie, or that granddad or that uncle, right? Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, right? You got until you see it for yourself and you know what we're talking about. When certain things going on, you can't. You got to believe it. You got to only believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. Because when you hear certain things, they ain't, folks ain't always telling the truth until you do some further investigation or research, or you have to pay attention when people say certain things. You got to listen and tuck it away and keep that in the back of your mind. So when it does, like when the draft came up, and I'm listening and listening, saying like I was wondering the same thing, guys. Like, man, usually you hear some trade talks before the draft, and it ain't been much conversation going on or stuff happening. But soon, and Adam Schefter was the one that said it. But soon as that draft happened and that pick happened with the Giants, he came out after that pick and said, "Oh yeah, a conversation was going on for 2 weeks." So trust me, there's been some conversation going on about Shedeur Sanders and how this whole thing was going to happen. And I'm just telling you, hopefully we'll find out. We'll see where he ends up. And at the point, like somebody said, if you haven't drafted a quarterback by now, you're not looking at that person coming in being a starter, potential starter for your team. At this point, you're looking for a decent backup, right? That's what you're looking for. And still, like you said, Shedeur doesn't need the money because who his father is and who he is. But I will tell you, some of these teams don't want you to have more going on. Shedeur has a lot of money he's made himself. A lot of these kids with his NIL, and that's why I'm thankful for NIL, right? Because if Shedeur just said, and I doubt he does this, I don't think he should do this. He should take his opportunity and play. But there are some guys that may not have that opportunity to play. So thankfully, you have NIL opportunities for some of these kids to be able to make money. Okay, because some of these kids who get drafted late or go in as undrafted free agents, your chances of making a team is tough. I'm not saying you're not going to make a team, but it's tough. It might take you a couple of years. Okay, my son went through that as an preferred undrafted free agent. So I know I went in as an undrafted free agent, just like my older brother. So it's tough when you come in that route. Okay, and so, but if you had the blessing of being a really good player at your team, and you had some NFL teams considering drafting you, or being a preferred undrafted free agent, then it's more than likely in this day and time with NIL, you probably made some NIL money, and hopefully you've been smart, or not smart but wise about handling that NIL money, right? Because some of you guys may not get that opportunity to be drafted. But if you had the blessing of earning some NIL opportunities at your institution where you played, if you played Division I or FCS Division I, FCS Division I, and something like this happens where you're not drafted real high or you're not drafted at all, and you may get a look and get invited to camp, but you got some of that NIL money that you held on to. That's why some of you young kids need to hold on to that NIL money during your 4 years in college, because you don't know what's going to happen. You're not sure what is going to happen. You don't know if you might get some sort of injury that might drop your stock for the next level, NFL level. You just don't know. Right? Or for you young ladies out there, when it comes to the WNBA and pro volleyball, anything, Olympic team for different things, in track and field, you just don't know. So if you have an opportunity to earn some NIL opportunity, especially when you're a football and basketball athlete in college, you need to handle that money wisely. Okay. And so that's something I'm going to have to add on my webinar, because at the time I was initially creating my webinar information, I don't think NIL was in place. It was in the works, but it wasn't in place. So that's definitely something I'm gonna have to add to my webinar that I'll be coming out with later this summer, that you'll have an opportunity to register and purchase and be on the Zoom. Because like I've told people, I put 2 kids through school and come out with very little to no debt for their education, because I invested early. Right now, granted, I played college and pro football, following an older brother doing the same thing. So I knew from an athletic standpoint how to earn scholarships, but also as somebody who's been in financial aid for 25 years, and my brother 30 years, 30 plus years. I know it from that aspect too, on what you need to do to help you earn other scholarships, institutional and outside scholarships, the things that you need to start doing with your kids in middle school, right? And early high school, not late high school or graduating from high school, middle school and early high school. You need to start doing some things. So you'll have an opportunity when I finish this and get it all organized, to purchase and register to be on the webinar and get some great information about what you need to do as a parent and a young athlete, male or female, and getting the ball rolling, right? So if you want to hear from my personal experience with putting 2 kids through school that had very little to no debt, one was an athlete and one was a non-athlete, Jeff and Zach, very little debt. I told my younger son, ask some of your friends who parents had to borrow money compared to what the very little debt you had. I think maybe he had about 10 or 12,000 at the most, that he had to borrow during his 4 years in college. And that was it for the most part, because he had scholarships, the Florida Lottery Scholarship, the institutional scholarship. He had different things like that. So I'll be sharing that information on my webinar that you'll have a chance to register just like you did for the football camp at my website, lovethegame247.com. I'll be putting that out there. So I'm about to sign off here, guys. I appreciate you joining me today. But be sure go to my website, lovethegame247.com, and join and get this information. Hold on one second, do something here. Sorry about that, but just make sure you when I release the dates for the webinar or date for the webinar, like I did for the football camp, sharing that information, the next event is coming up with Coach Smith and Love the Game 24/7. Be sure you plug in, right? Be sure you follow me on all my platforms, and you'll be able to get all my platforms from lovethegame247.com from my website. And also I'll be releasing some merch, right? For some of you all who may not have been on here, this is my camp. This is my football camp t-shirt for the athletes. I had Play It Again Sports, Academy Sports, my pastor from Epic Church, Pastor Chris Green, and his wife Erica. They also invested in my football camp, and were sponsors. LTG 24/7. Y'all see that? LTG. This was my camp t-shirt, right? And I'm going to be releasing some more gear for Love the Game. LTG 247. Some more gear, hats, short shirts. I had a black and gold on one show recently, and I'll have to play that and wear that one again so you all can see it. But I'll be releasing some more merch on my website. But I appreciate you guys joining me, man. I just want to jump on quick and talk about all this stuff that's going on with Shedeur and his draft. So, hey, man, let's just hope and see where he lands and gets his opportunity. I haven't checked to see if he's gotten drafted yet. But yeah, I mean, we all know they're trying to send a message to the Sanders family, and it's sad that they just let's keep it football. Sometimes these people get caught up in their feelings, and Dion hasn't done anything wrong, right? We're making sure his kids are prepared to play at the next level. That's all he's done, really. And definitely, I don't think Shedeur, Sanders, or Shiloh think they're bigger than the game. And I know their father has let them know you're not bigger than the game. You got to be prepared to play the game, and they've been prepared. So, but hey, we'll see what happens with Shedeur and Shiloh, man. But y'all have a good rest of the weekend. Enjoy the rest of the draft, and let's see what happens where these 2 young men land. And hey, congratulations to all the other young men that have been drafted. Like I said, I think all these guys, even these other quarterbacks, they all deserve their opportunity, right? They're all good in their own way, and we'll see what they'll bring to the game. But yeah, so let's not take anything from them, those guys either. They all worked hard to get their opportunity, and they deserve their opportunity. But we also know Shedeur Sanders deserves his opportunity, and he's not riding on his dad's name. They're out there playing ball and playing really good football, and making their own name, right? So They've done a good job. Shiloh and Shedeur have done a good job in carrying that name, that Sanders name, and being high-level athletes. I'm not going to say they're the best like their father, no, but they're right there. They are considered top-level talent, right, for their generation, and they deserve an opportunity, and hopefully they'll get that opportunity, which I don't doubt that they will. But let's not take anything from those other young men that have worked hard for their opportunity. And so I look forward to seeing how some of these guys are going to pan out, right? It's going to be interesting to see, right? And then we'll know, right? We'll be able to call those teams out, and we'll know. But y'all take it easy. Have a great rest of the weekend. Y'all be blessed. Be careful out there. Enjoy the weekend. Be safe.